really, really fun.
We
I'm
are.
actually moving my little chat over here so I don't look at it directly.
Right.
But all right, so can we just have another audio check on me? Charlie, are Mark and I pretty much level between each other? Mark, say hi.
Testing one, two, three.
Hello, hello. Are we
Pretty
good?
good.
Okay.
Close. Yeah.
I can move a little closer to mic and camera if you need.
Yeah, I think I hear you two both fine. I'm more
Okay.
worried that every now and then I peak.
Oh,
So
really?
I
Because you,
don't, because
you
since
sound
I,
good.
okay, good. All right, well, we're already live. We've already been having a conversation talking about our sound, but we were curious about what all y'all were thinking. And while we're letting people into the room, I will take this opportunity to welcome you all today to another edition of our Tuesday Tech Talk. And for those of you who don't know, because I think we have a lot of new people joining us today, well, my name is Annie Capps, and I am the a longtime advocate of the Folk Alliance region Midwest. I've worn a lot of hats in this organization, and I'm the former conference director, the co-founder, along with Charlie Mossbrook, who is manning the backstage there, of the Virtual Connections program that you are participating in right now. And we started the whole idea of Tech Talks back when COVID and us were trying to all figure out the tech of live streaming and other forms of communicating and connecting with each other virtually. We've got all that stuff down, supposedly, now.
Good.
That the Tech Talk stuck. So we are having a Tech Talk on the technical aspects of some very interesting topics. And today's topic is one that I've been wanting to do for a very, very long time, ever since this gentleman who is sitting next to me in the virtual room, Mark Rust, has started joining our community peer gatherings. And I have been very intrigued by the fact that he's been making a living as a musician for the last 50 years, and I had no idea who he was. And not that it matters, because I just mean not doing the same circuit that a lot of us are chasing, if I were to use that word. But Mark is as a solo artist, Mark has performed across the country in Canada and Japan. He's a prolific songwriter with over 200 songs and has been called one of the Northeast's great undiscovered songwriters. His songs, this is new to me, have been recorded by Louise Mandrell, Stan Rogers, Mary McCaslin, and others. And when your songs are being recorded by other people, that is a songwriter. So I'm very excited to learn a little bit more about Mark's songs in my discovery. But you can read a lot more about Mark's background and music on his website. Today we are focusing on his prolific 50-year career as a full-time musician and performing beyond the folk venue circuit. He currently gives over 100 performances a year at colleges, schools, libraries, festivals, and clubs. He has been honored with the nomination for a Campus Entertainment Award by the National Association for Campus Activities, NACA, which those of us who were ever pursuing any of these types of extracurricular things beyond the folk circuit have heard of NACA. I've heard of it for years. It seemed like the elusive thing. So, Mark, that was like, I don't know. That was the thing for me. I always thought that was the place to go make extra money. Everybody talked about it, but it seemed hard for me. I don't even know where to begin, except it seems logical that we should begin with the beginning.
Okay, sure. I mean, real quickly. And by the way, thanks everybody for coming by. I think I started out where a lot of us did, which is growing up with traditional coffee houses, folk festivals, house concerts. And my family was a performing act. My grandmother was called Swiss Trudy. She was a professional yodeler from Switzerland. And so my parents and my brother and sister and I and we were all in the act. We had it was like the Von Trapp family. And so we traveled and performed at festivals and concerts, and we sang traditional Swiss songs, traditional American songs, some of my songs. And if you think you had a weird like growing up and teenage years, I was on stage with my family yodeling in Lederhosen, right? So, that was pretty interesting years. But what that gave me, by the time I got to college, I already had years of performing experience on a somewhat professional level, and so that really helped me quite a lot moving forward into a solo career and the folk world and beyond. So, I mean, essentially,
Sorry,
when
I just left myself muted. Cool. I'm sorry. I'm stuck on the lederhosen. I feel like we could have like a whole chat
oh
about
yeah.
like performing in lederhosen.
So
All
essentially,
right.
what happened after that was, I went to college, and I had seen for years. We saw people like John and Tony and Ed Trickett and Gordon Bach and Bill Staines and Robin and Linda Williams. And then I got to college, and the couple colleges I went to had great coffee house programs. Now, I don't know if they had this so much in the Midwest, but in the Northeast, there was this great college coffee house circuit. And I began to see a lot of the same performers that I had seen in these coffee houses at the colleges. And the things I was picking up on was, number one, they were making a lot more money doing it. And second, they were performing in a somewhat different way for the college audience than they had been for the folk audience. So I was like making a mental note, that's interesting. And so when I got out of college, I was playing mostly coffee houses, folk festivals, and I thought, well, how can I monetize this a little better? Let me try that college kind of work. And I got into it through NACA and through just pursuing on my own. And that was a great run for a long time. A lot of musicians made a good living on the college coffee house circuit. That ran through about the mid 80s. And then that whole scene started kind of wrapping up. My mom was a school teacher. I went into her school and sometimes entertained with the kids. And she was telling me, oh, yeah, they hire people to come through and do assemblies and workshops. And so in my head, I went, well, here's another way to play music and get paid well to do it. And then, like, the last piece is, like all of you, you're driving around and you see concerts in the park, the summer concert series. And you're going, how do they get that? And so I started discovering how you do get that. And that's become a big part of my summer work now.
Yeah. So it is different actually because there is a very, seasonal kind of journey for the performer, like what you do, I would imagine. Like your summertime, you're doing a lot of outdoor gigs and
Yeah.
obviously not during the school season. So,
A lot of camps.
yeah,
Yes, during the school year, it's a lot of colleges and schools, and in the summer, as soon as it warms up, and we'll get into the details of that. Usually, the park and rec department of any community they have the budgets and they hire the entertainment. And so they not only do those summers in the park, the concerts in the park, but they also handle all the entertainment for their camps. And there's hundreds of these camps out there. And
yeah.
if you have a show that you can do for kids in a school, you can apply that to the camps too. And that's there's a good living to be made playing summer camps.
Well, okay, so you brought up the thing, because one of the things that I found so incredibly impressive when I went to your website, and I will post this in the chats later, I just don't want y'all to get distracted by it right now, but one of the Mark's programs page on his website is insane. Like, there are so many programs, and how did you think about developing these programs in the first place?
Right. So for all of these markets, for all of them really, but particularly schools and particularly colleges, I used to present myself as Mark Rust folk singer. Now, as the folk singer need on campuses was becoming less and less, I was at one of these NACA conferences, and a school came by, and I overhear them have this conversation. They said, well, we don't have a coffee house anymore, but we have St. Patrick's Day coming up, and maybe Mark could bring his instruments and sing some Irish songs, and I kind of went, oh yeah, they still have needs for music, just not my name and folk singer. And so I started promoting on college campus a St. Patrick's show, and I just sang all my favorite Irish songs and tunes, right? Guitar and banjo and fiddle. And then I thought, what else do they got going on here, And then, well, there's Earth Day the next month, got an Earth Day show, and that sort of transformed into, I have almost 2 or 3 programs for schools and for colleges each progressive month for things that they got going on. And I can go into more detail about that if you like as well.
Yeah,
But it was
well,
really, it was all venue led. It wasn't my idea. It was like they would call up at a college, say, Constitution Day is coming. Do you have a Constitution Day program? And I said, I sure do. And then went and put it together. Right?
exactly. The
I had
answer
a
is
college,
yes.
they have Veterans Day. They said, could you do the songs of World War I? I said, absolutely. Had no idea what the songs of World War I were. But one of the great things is, and I want to backtrack for a minute, and that's one of the great reasons to do these markets. It makes you flex your musical muscles and step outside of your comfort zone of whatever it is you got going on. You learn more music, you learn more ways of entertaining different audiences with a broader bunch of material.
Yeah, yeah. That was my next thing from everything you're talking about. It's like if you go in with the answer is yes, but not everybody's going to get as lucky to get a phone call. So, Mark, do you have a program like this, right? Like, you obviously had to do some outreach.
Yeah, but
ultimately, and like find your way to, like, okay, now I have all these programs. How do I go tell everybody about them and go get these gigs, right?
okay, so how to get them? That's a
Yeah.
good place to start.
Hmm.
So for each of these markets, I do a vast direct mail flyer program. Direct mail just means flyers in the mail. I'm well aware that in most markets, particularly in the college market, conventional thinking is that flyers don't work. I will tell you right now, that's how I get all of my work, all of it. You put a few of these programs on there. So for the colleges, for example, in the beginning of the school year, I send a flyer and it's got maybe a dozen different programs that are coming up for the fall. Family Weekend, I have a holiday show, a Veterans Day show, Constitution Day, Thanksgiving, all the different programs for that semester. That goes out. And then each month, about a month before those events, I'll do another flyer just highlighting that event. Okay, here comes the holidays. I got a multicultural holiday show, and they love it. They eat it up. Well, more in the past than now. It's been slow, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But and that's how I do it with flyers. And then also following up with emails. And
Yeah.
let me just say one thing about that. A lot of musicians don't have an advertising budget for
Mm.
themselves, which is confounding to me. That a lot of musicians want to spend thousands on instruments and recordings and festivals and song contests. I don't know what, lots of stuff, and they don't want to spend any money on advertising. It's the thing everybody in business does, you know, and it's not cheap, but you can find an affordable way to do it. And I really recommend finding out what are your for each of us, we have different resources, right? We have different strengths as musicians and performers. I'm just drawing on mine. What interests me, you know? There are certain things that don't, and there are certain things that do. So let me go into the ones that I think are my strengths, pull a program out of that, and then research a little bit. Go on a college's website, look on their calendar, look at the stuff they have coming up. And
Yeah.
you can say, oh, they're doing something for that. They're doing something for that. For a lot of women performers, Women's History Month is like March, right? Put a program together
Every
and pitch
month,
it to
Mark.
college.
It's every month.
Okay. But I mean, but,
I'm
but I
just
mean, what's
saying.
happening is what's happening is that college programmers, who among all the millions of
Yeah.
things they're doing, they see that Women's History Month is coming. They
Yeah.
want to check that box. If you can present them something ready to go and say,
Yes.
I have a Women's History music program, and they'll go, great, sign it up. I mean, that's a good way to get into it, for example.
Okay, so you said colleges, and this is the other thing. Is like I can't tell if we're all 100% now focused on colleges, or if there are, elementary schools, high schools, colleges.
Right.
If it's do you see
Yes.
all of these programs crossing over into all of those different areas?
No.
Right. So
No, not
can
really.
you? You're
There's a
focusing right
couple.
now on college.
I'm just speaking about college. For
Yeah. Okay.
schools, you're dealing with, I only deal with a K-5 audience, and that's mostly because after fifth grade, they're just a terrible audience. And kids, those of you who have kids who have been in schools, once they hit fifth grade, suddenly they're becoming really self-aware. And when they're in an assembly program, it's like, this is dumb. And it's just no fun having that kind of audience. But up until then, kids are a great audience. So I pick them up but up to fifth grade, and I catch them again when they get into college because their minds open up again, and they're willing to listen to and experience more music that they don't know about in a non-conscious, self-conscious way. So for schools, the booking time is the same. So for colleges, like I said, that starts when college starts. Same thing with schools. I used to try to promote stuff earlier in August, but I found there was just nobody's there.
Yeah.
So I find most schools, if you're trying to do the school market, they will wait till they get back into school because they got to get their PTA and PTO together and their budgets and who's in charge of what. And then they'll start saying, okay, let me look at the calendar. Where can we start putting in cultural arts programs and performing arts programs? So you
Yeah.
can really catch them at the beginning of the year. But for those programs, again, you can look on my site. There's less of them because obviously stuff like a Veterans Day show, you're not going to perform for elementary school kids. So I have about a half dozen different assembly programs that can do the whole school. And then there's a handful of class workshops that are like songwriting, instrument building, country dance, learn to play the spoons, stuff like that. So
Wow.
that they can do on their own as workshops, or they can sometimes combine. Some schools will say, let's do an assembly in the program and then a couple workshops in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And even some schools, you can get like a little artist in residency going where they'll have you in for the week and you get all the music classes, and each class gets to do different things, so there's lots of different ways they'll put it together, but there's less programs because a, a, an elementary intermediate school audience is very specific with what you can do and can't do with them.
I would imagine even regionally that sort of is pretty vastly different in some cases, but that's probably getting into the weeds probably more. But you are right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're mostly focused in your region right now in the Northeast. You're sort of staying within like a certain amount of, you talked about spokes of the wheel and sort of like just, yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And that's for two main reasons. One is that I'm traveling with not only my full sound system and lights, but I've got a guitar, banjo, fiddle, hammer, dulcimer, mountain dulcimer. I got all these instruments. You just can't fly with that kind of deal.
Yeah.
You just can't. So I've determined how far am I willing to drive, you know?
Yeah.
And the nice thing about these markets, and this is another good reason to be doing them, is that typically for like the well-known people in the folk market, the John Gorkas and Garnet Rogers, Reggie Harris, they're crisscrossing the country throughout the year. In these markets, you can sort of think of your touring as like a spoke of a wheel with you in the hub. You go out, you play, you come home. You go out, you play, and come home. For example, next week, I'm doing 7 shows next week in 5 days.
Wow.
I'll be in my bed every night of the week.
Wow.
With the traveling, because I'm never more than a few hours from home.
Yeah.
So it avails you to do that. So you can determine how far you want to go. But I'll tell you what, there's exponentially more schools and colleges and park and rec programs in your region than there are coffee houses and folk festivals. So this allows you to really supplement, not only grow as a musician, but supplement your income, especially if you want to be a full-time musician.
Yeah. And okay, so so much. So that, like, I can see that building your audience, you're going to be playing to people that aren't necessarily familiar with the folk circuit, right?
That's
They might
totally
not be familiar.
unfamiliar.
They may not even know there's a folk club within an hour's drive of where they live, and they come and see like you at this farmer's market or this street fair or whatever it is that you're playing that particular day. So I can see that as a benefit.
Well, not only the audiences, but
Yeah.
the venues. That's why it's
Sure.
like those of you who are trying to break into or compete in the folk scene, because of the recession of 08, 09, it
Yeah.
pushed all of those top tier performers like Robin and Linda Williams and John Gork out of the little theater and concert series, pushed them right back down into the coffee house market. So now when I go to play, you're competing with your heroes. When you get outside of that, when you get to schools and colleges and communities, they've never heard of those people. So you're competing on an even stand. You have if you have a good program, you have a very competitive way of getting those gigs.
I love that too. You said you don't have to be well known to get these gigs.
You don't. No, they don't
I
care.
know.
They don't care. There's no name association. They just care about qualities of programs.
Yeah.
And if they like the idea of your program, that's all that matters. There's very little name kind of thing.
And
The
then
only-
you got to bring it. Like once you show
Yep.
up, you obviously have to be able to do and fulfill the job or you're not getting asked back. And once you've proven yourself, you have that.
You gotta
So,
have the goods. You gotta have the goods and be able to perform for a non-folk music audience
yeah.
in a really entertaining and fun way. But like I say, I come from that, and I just figured out how to get there. And if you want, not everybody doesn't want to do that, but if you want to, that's why there's gigs, there's money, there's audiences and opportunities out there.
I'm going to
I'll keep
assume
up.
that, but yeah, I'm going to assume that most of our audience here knows how to perform and knows how to entertain and that they're here because I think but all of us need, right, those opportunities to keep doing it. The more you do it, the more you stretch those musical muscles, as we
Although
talked
the one thing I
about.
will say with kids, if you haven't had
That's
much
the hard.
experience performing with kids, you don't know how to perform.
Yes.
Kids are a completely different audience. But I'll tell you this, if you can do it successfully, they can be the best show you'll have all year. Because kids, it's like a rock show then. You're as famous as anybody at that point to them. And if you can really engage them in a program, it's a fantastic audience.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that they will show you what's working and what's not. That's the great thing. I always say when you're performing for adults, any adult audience, and they're not really liking what you're doing, here's what they look like.
Sometimes they really like what you're doing and they look like that.
Yeah. But even if they don't, this is right. If you're performing for kids and they're not digging what you're doing, here's what they look like. And I'm telling you, once you're in a gym with 200 kids and you start to lose them, it's twice as hard to get them back. So,
Yeah.
I will tell you this, if you're interested in performing at schools, don't think it's easy because it's kids, because it's
Oh,
not. It's tough. But they will show you what's working and not, and you will eventually have a great 45 minutes that kids love.
I feel like we need a whole nother conversation about how to perform for kids.
That could
Because
be.
I feel like that could be one of those things where we just go way down into the rabbit hole. But let's, so keep that on the back burner. If
Yeah.
we're going to do part two.
And I want you to mention, I don't know if we want to get to, the park and rec
Yeah.
stuff, because do you want to move on to that?
I mean, sure, but I'm curious. You mentioned that. So NACA's not around anymore.
No, it is, sure.
Oh, it is. Okay, great. So you're still utilizing that
Not so
program or
much.
no? Are you just,
For
okay.
those not familiar, and maybe you've been to the
Yeah.
folk conferences in your region, it's very similar, right? It's but probably more buyers. You might have 135 schools there that book entertainment, and they have showcases like you do. They have exhibit halls that are the exhibit halls are more weight on. There could be two or three a day, and they're like an hour and a half, and you're required to be in your booth. And those are long days. The reason I was very active in NACA, in fact, I was for the Northeast region, I was the performer representative on the board for a few years.
Oh, wow.
So I got a pretty good inside look. You used to be able to go there and come away with, some gigs making it worthwhile. It's less and less so as colleges have started moving away from that kind of stuff, unfortunately. And especially since COVID, I'm talking to other college agents who I'm friends with, because my work is down since COVID. And I think that they got used to not booking live entertainment, and it hasn't really come back in the way that it should. Used to be, before COVID, it would be 50% of my schedule. Now it's about 20%. But the good thing about having these other markets in schools and parks and recs is that, like having your financial investments. You don't put everything in stocks, everything in bonds. You have your investments spread so that when one goes down, the other is going to support you up. Same thing with these markets. So the colleges are down, schools are way up, park and recs are way up.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just take a quick break to check in with Charlie.
Charlie!
But hold on, say hi, Charlie. But I also want to say the chat is, we probably should have said this earlier, but for those of you who have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and you can send them right to Charlie, if you like. He's up there at Midwest Folk. Well, I don't know. Charlie, he's in here twice. I don't know. Are you in here twice, Charlie? Unmute yourself and
Yeah,
talk.
one of them has my name, and the one that has my name says direct your questions here.
The
Got
chat
you.
is disabled.
It is disabled? Oh, okay. That's interesting.
That's disabled.
Oh, I thought you said I'm disabled, which is true, but what?
Oh, jeez.
Participants can, it says participants can chat with host and co-host. It
Just
shouldn't
the
be
host and co-host, there's not an open chat. It just goes.
Yeah,
to-
it says just
It's
disabled.
disabled.
Well, that's really, but all right, I'm going to open the chat, but we're going to ask that you let the conversation be restricted to questions for Mark at this conversation. I'm sorry about that. I wondered why it was so quiet over there. But I wanted to also say right now, because this question gets asked a lot, yes, first of all, this is being live streamed right now out to our YouTube channel and Facebook. Facebook will stay out there for 30 days. YouTube will stay out there for as long as YouTube is out there. I don't use the word forever or permanent.
Long after we're gone.
Ever. Right. Long after, we'll see. Well, who knows? Anything could happen. But okay, so now the chat should be wide open. Feel free to drop your questions in there. We will also, if you want to raise your hand, if you have a question and you think of it and you want to go ahead and raise your hand, we're happy to interrupt. I see Joni's raising her hand already. Do you know where let's talk about the raise hand feature so it bumps you up to the top of the screen. You've got it. Good, Joni. Okay, so those of you who don't know, if you go into React, click on the little heart that says React, and just above Be Right Back, you should see Raise Hand.
Yes,
You can
I
also
think
put
it
heart
also does it automatically at this point. Like if you physically raise your hand.
Well, yeah, if you got your gestures enabled, I have yet to be able to make that work for me. I don't know why that doesn't work. But
I'm seeing a couple questions come up on my little screen here too, not in the chat. One quick one is it's not MACA, it's NACA. NACA is the National Association of Campus Activities.
Yep.
It's a conference for schools and for performers to link up and experience each other. And they have conferences. There's a national and they have regionals. So there's one out in the Midwest as well. And you have to join the organization, then you have to pay to go to the conferences. And if you get a showcase, you have to pay extra for that. You have to pay for an exhibit booth. But it's a trade show for college entertainment. And there are others. There's APCA. There's others I don't know as much about it, but the one I know most about is NACA. The other question was, are the 45 minutes programs for schools? It works out perfectly because their school times are 45-minute classes typically. So if you can fit into that, that's just about as a sweet spot. But keep in mind, I tell people when you're performing for pre-K and K kids, more like 30, 35 minutes. They don't have 45 minutes in something they loving. Okay, but from second grade up, they can do a full 45 if you're good, and that works out well for them. And that'll work also for camps. I do a lot of camp shows sponsored by towns, and it's a 45 to an hour program because I'm going to get them up interacting and dancing and moving, so you get a little longer out of it. But that's the sweet spot, I think.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna. Okay, so Joni, go ahead and ask your question.
So my question is actually what Gus just put into the chat. In terms of flyers, because I've been trying this for years with schools, and who are you actually sending it to that it gets through?
Right, it's a good question. All of these flyers, you don't know who the person is who it's going to land, because in schools, the person who books the programs, it could be the principal or vice principal, it could be the secretary, could be the music teacher or one of the teachers. Now, I don't know if you have these programs out there. In New York State, we have a program called BOCES, which is an acronym for Board of Cooperative Education Services. And they provide funding for programs like this for the schools. There's also what's called A&E, Arts and Education, which is a program designed to bring the performing and cultural arts into schools. It could be that person. So I just address it to assembly programs and the school. And then like a little note in a bottle in the ocean, it finds its way there, because in schools particularly they have cubby holes for the mail. So the secretary will see it's for assemblies and they'll know whose box it goes in. And then you either hear from them or you don't.
So you're sending hard copies, you're
Hard
mailing
copy
these
flyers, that's right. And I
Okay.
send out, just to give you an idea, again, it's different in the Midwest. In the Northeast, we're loaded with schools. I probably send out 2,200 elementary and intermediate school flyers. And so that's a lot. And it takes time and it takes money, but that's how all the work comes in. I mean, because you're going to hear from schools you never would have thought to. But the last thing I want to say is you can go as small as you want. Start small. Start with the schools in your county, for example, and then expand from there. But there's one little caveat to that, which is a weird thing in this business. I don't know if it's in folk music. If it's close to you, you're the local guy. And it for some reason destroys your credibility. None of the schools in my area ever hire me. It's the schools where I'm going up to Rochester and Syracuse and Buffalo, and they're the ones who are booking me. And the guys who live there, they're not getting booked there because they're the local guy. So there is a little bit
true, the local artist stigma.
Yeah, when you're the local guy, you don't get credibility no matter what goes with it.
Interesting. All right, here's a question for you. Mark Green's asking, and this was something that was part of, I think it's good timing for this, and how does your whole booking approach apply to songwriters who do mostly their own original music? And could you have possibly built your kind of career without such a wide repertoire?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. All I can tell you is my decisions early on was I decided to make my career a business. Yeah. And when you make it a business, then the financial aspect moves a little to the front. I knew that even when I was a young man that I wanted to eventually get married. I wanted to raise children. I wanted to send my kids to college. I wanted to have a comfortable retirement. And in the early years of performing on the folk circuit, it did not look like that was going to take me there in the way that I would hope. In fact, there were times when I traveled with, Priscilla Herdman when she was pregnant and had trouble playing the guitar. I was her guitarist for a while on her tour. So I could sort of observe from a high level what goes on there. And I looked at that and said, no, even at the top, this doesn't look like what's going to work for me. So, I mean, it could be that if I had just stayed with my own music and performing on a folk acoustic circuit, that it could have worked out differently. But, we'll never know. And I'm happy that I went into the roots that I did, because I think it made me a better performer and a more varied musician.
Do you still play some of the folk gigs?
Anyone that calls, yeah. Any coffee house that calls. No, really. Any coffee house,
yeah.
And they do. There are some coffee houses and folk programs and folk festivals that call and have me come. I'll do it for whatever they got, because that's what I come from and that's what I love, and that's a bit of giving back and enjoying. There's nothing better than that. Those
Yeah.
gigs are far better than all these gigs I'm talking about, really. A lot of these times, these college gigs, you're musical wallpaper, and the same thing with the park and rec stuff, depending on the thing. You could just be playing to almost nobody, but, so it's a different thing. But on the other hand, it's allowed me to do those things I wanted to do and be a present father and be around my kids as they're growing and to have a home and to put my kids through college and things like that. So I don't regret it at all.
I love that. I also think though that so I would imagine, and we've done some of those street fairs and farmers markets and some of those kind of wallpaper gigs. I love that. That's very good. I find those so freeing sometimes because you're getting a paycheck, whether somebody's sitting out front or not, you're getting some money. And B, you get to practice. And we mostly play our original songs. So, in those cases, that's what our.
And let me go a step further with that. Is the college gigs now, it's nowhere near the coffee house things it used to be. Now they play what they call nooners, and you're playing, and they expect you to set up because
Such
they
a
have a
bad
free
name.
hour somewhere in the middle of the day. There's no classes, right? So everybody congregates somewhere in the student union. You're expected to put on a show in like a cafeteria or something. And you will literally look out and see everybody has their backs to you. They have headphones. They're on their computers and phones. You may think they're not even paying attention. But I'm telling you, all the college performers will tell you this. You get done with a show, students will come up and say, that song you played about that, and what's that instrument over there that you played, and where can I find more about? They're listening, but not like a folk music coffeehouse audience. They're listening the way kids listen now, and completely multitasking. They're reading, they're studying, they have this going on, and they're hearing you. So if you can do that, then, but you have to have pretty thick skin. You have to have a belief that you're having an impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I was going to ask you, and we detoured. We were talking about we were going to go into Parks and Rec,
Yes.
but do you the negotiating the fee and price and like how you decide? Do they decide? Do you say here's what I cost? Do you your whole bargaining and negotiating situation in these cases? Is
Well,
it
they're gonna have-
similar with the Parks and Rec? Is it different with everyone? Do you want to talk about it individually or as a whole? Kind of.
Well, and let me just say, the park, it's a different beast and a different marketing aspect too. So let me get to that in a moment. But, well, geez, it's like anything. But I will say that these people have their budgets and they are what they are. So you can try to find out where you can push that. I'll tell you that, nothing's a hard and fast rule. But like, for example, on the college market, as a solo performer, you can probably easily get somewhere between $750 and $1,000. That's a budgeted program for them. When it goes over 1,000, a lot of colleges have to now get approval from other offices or combine with something else. But usually anything under $1,000 is a deal for them, as crazy as that sounds. So you can try to get what you can. Schools are they're a little all over the place. I know, and because they have their budgets, some are getting assistance, some are coming out of their own school budget, some have PTA assistance, and they're all different. So I think it's best for you to what I do is I decide what will I do it for and still feel good about myself.
Yeah.
And I just won't do it for less than that. I try not to let money be the thing that keeps somebody from getting a show. That's kind of my mantra. But you also have to feel good about it, especially if you're going to drive like I am today. I'm driving to Rochester, New York, 4.5 hours away. There's just a certain amount I'm going to have to charge for that, no matter what the show is. So I think it's more like deciding in yourself what you're willing to do it for. I see in school booking pamphlets, there are people charging everything from $1,500 down to $250, $350.
Yeah.
So I think decide what you have to get and tell them that's what you charge. And by the way, all these markets, particularly colleges and schools, if they want a program that's early and it's far away, it's going to be a hotel. They are accustomed to paying for a hotel. So that's a big difference from some of the private markets. You could say, here's the fee I want, and by the way, you want me there for a noontime show. I got to load in at 10. I got to come out the night before and stay. It's another $150. Okay. Or maybe they'll book. They have a deal going with a local hotel, and they'll book it and just attach it to your contract. But does that sort of answer it? I don't mean to be mushy.
No,
about it.
that's great. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand. It's the same with everything. I would
the same
imagine,
with
just in
everything,
general,
yes.
right? Like every folk club has a different
Decide what
budget.
you'll do it for,
You just,
and
yeah. You can pitch a price, and I mean, for me, I usually say, "What's your budget?" because I can't tell you how many times I've lowballed when they would have paid me twice as much as I said I could.
Well,
do. So,
there was going to be that.
it's like, wait a second. So now I highball and then just wait and see what they say. Yeah.
There is, everybody has totally different budgets. There are colleges that have, some of the colleges I've been playing for years, we get to the next year, they want to book again. They say, by the way, you have to raise your prices. You're too cheap. And so I'll say, okay, they have, they can afford over $1,000 for a show. Whereas other colleges, I know when I say, well, it's going to be a hotel, and they go, well, I don't know. And then you know that you've hit their ceiling,
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't hurt to ask for your top price, and that you'll find out soon enough whether they can afford it or not. But I will tell you that for colleges, that's a pretty good range just for a solo. If you're a duo or trio, even more, right?
Yeah.
With schools, somewhat similar. There are schools can only afford one assembly program. There are others that have me for the day, and it winds up being almost $1,000 with the different things I'm doing and a hotel thrown in. So obviously they have it and other schools don't. So it's very difficult to know. But throw out your best price and see if you can work it out. And
And
like I
you-
say, try not to let money be the thing that doesn't make it happen.
Right. Right. Because you got to also have a certain amount of passion for wanting to entertain the kids, right? And
Yeah,
bring
plus
something
it's
to
just good
them.
karma. It's
Yeah.
just like I don't like when money is the thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can make me turn down a show. I hate when it's money.
Yeah.
That just seems like a bad excuse to not do it. But especially with gigs that are far. If it's local, there's a local senior home here. They got $200. 200, okay, it's 15 minutes away and it's senior home, right? So I'll do that. But if I got to drive, and there's other expenses, there's just no way. So everybody has to decide in yourself what it's worth to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we didn't even talk about the senior centers, but that's a whole different wheelhouse. And
That's a whole different thing, and I'm not going to go into
Yeah,
it
we
because they're
can-
on the real low end of
yeah.
you know.
But yeah. Okay. So before we move on to Parks and Rec, I want to make sure any of the college questions
Okay.
were answered. So I'm seeing a lot of folks sharing their experiences, which I love. But if anyone's question wasn't answered,
Yeah, because there was also a question about who do you send your flyers to in a college?
In a college
that-
situation,
That's
yeah.
a great question. By the way, I see Mike Green out there. Hi, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike and I started out together. We were both living in Ithaca. I was just out of college, and Mike was already gigging. He had a van and a sound system. He gave me some good pointers starting because he was already doing a lot of colleges back then. So I'm sure he relates to a lot of this, right, Mike? But he was very helpful early on and was a great assistance, sort of moving me along. But we come from the same sort of origin place.
Nice.
Who to send it to? Okay, so in the old days at a college, it used to be just called the Student Activities Office because when you go to a college, you pay a student activities fee, and that covers everything non-academic: sports, plays, lectures, music, everything. Now, it's sometimes that. It could be student activities, could be student services. What I'm seeing recently in the last couple of years, it's student engagement and involvement. That's the office. I think if you just addressed it to, and again, you're just doing a mailing label, Student Activities Office, care of the college. And that tends to find its way to the right person. It could be a variety of other offices called, but it's the office, there's one office that books the entertainment, and it should find its way there. And without contacting the college directly, it's impossible to know what they're calling it. But student activities should cover it.
cool. Nice. All right.
And in those offices, by the way, there's an activities director and assistant director. They're the paid full-time professionals. Sometimes they have a student activities board called an SAB, and it's varies at every college. Sometimes the student activities board, the students are in control of who gets booked and when and what, and the activities director just sort of advises them. Sometimes the activities director does all of it, or some mixture of that. So just be aware. It's good to reach out to the office because they're there all the time, and contacting the students is near impossible. But be aware there may be a student activities board involved.
I want to ask, I have a really great question from Patty, but so you're sending out the postcard first and then following up with a phone call within
flyer.
or
Yeah, like a
flyer. You're sending a flyer, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're following
a
up.
front and back tri-folded flyer listing whatever I'm pitching to them at the moment.
yeah. And then I'm sorry, you wait for the call or you got also a phone call? Okay.
Well, I don't do any cold calls anymore because
Okay.
people aren't taking cold calls anymore anyway.
Gotcha.
And let me just say one thing about emails, because people resist doing flyers. And this is what I tell people. When you get up in the morning and you open your email account and you see all the emails from people you don't know that you haven't asked for anything and they're selling you something, do you even open it? No. Delete, 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 delete. Now here's another scenario. Your mail comes in your mailbox. You walk down in your slippers and there's a thing from a handyman, or there's a thing to trim your bushes or mow your lawn or plow, and you go, huh, do I need that? Well, maybe I will. I'll put that away, or I could actually use that. Now, flyers operate in a completely different way than an email. So yes,
100%
emails
agree.
are free,
Yeah.
but I bet most of the emails never even get seen by the person you're sending it to.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 100%. So Patty's asking about when you are marketing to the folks, like if I'm going to go solicit a venue, I've got a video. They want a video. They want to see a performance. Do you have video set up? I'm going to read her thing, but if I'm marketing, say, Memorial Day show, Memorial Day relevant video with relevant songs, or would I just be able to send one of my generic videos and say, I have a program? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you create specific videos for those specific programs, or what's your press
Well,
kit look like?
it, yeah, okay. So there's two different ways of looking at it. As far as when you're trying to get the gig, there's very little of that. They'll tell you what they want if they're interested. So if somebody is interested, they want to see a little more something else of it or hear something else of it. At that point, you can direct them somewhere. On my website, I don't have as much of these as I should, but on my videos page, there's some original songs, there's some cover songs, because sometimes they want that kind of thing for a family weekend or something, songs people know. I have for Veterans Day, I play some of the Veterans Day stuff. There's an Earth Day. There's some I do a program, the music of civil rights. So it's there. So, you're going to direct people to your website. And let me just say this about websites really quick, because that's a whole nother talk, I'm sure. If you got to have a good website. I know that a lot of people are, oh, there's a program I can make my own. And you look at it and it looks like they did. Look at the people who you admire and look at their websites. Then look at yours. Because that's how it's going to get compared. Because you all know, as buyers of anything, forget music, the first thing you do is you go to a company's website and you check it out. And if it looks good, but if it immediately doesn't, so have a good website. That's one thing. So I've got videos there that people can watch, and sometimes they say, yeah, we were interested in this program, we saw a couple of the videos, let's book it. It rarely comes to sending them something else. People are not, doesn't seem to be that kind of request anymore. But I did a concert up at a theater in Canada where they shot the entire concert, and I can send them a full concert video in front of an audience, and they can see all the instruments that I play, the audience interaction, and all of that if they want. But typically, if you can have videos on your site where they can just say, they can go there without them asking. So if you have a Memorial Day program, that ought to be listed on your site. Here's one of my programs. You want to see a video of it? Yeah, here's a little snippet of a couple of the songs I do for Memorial Day. And so they can do all that research on their own. So by the time they call you, they're just ready to book the date.
Yeah. 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 So it's not unlike booking at any gig.
Okay.
You just need to probably in some ways. Yeah. 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 Gus, Mark, and all, do you create a circuit of venues, schools, parks, markets, etc., that you can come back to and that makes it more economical?
Yeah.
Do you add house concerts and listening rooms to the circuit visit? And I was, sure. Yeah.
Well, it's the kind of thing. Here's the difference between the folk circuit. My experience is that I'll play a folk venue and they'll sell out the place. The audience will love it. They say, this is one of the best shows we had all season. We'd love to have you back in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And I go, how do you get any consistency or building? I don't know how people do it,
I know.
So, and here's the difference with all of these markets. If they like you, they'll have you right back. Colleges, if they like what you're doing, schools, parking, they'll have you a couple times a year. And what's also different is that whereas coffee houses and folk venues, they don't want you playing anywhere near their venue for months, right? It's the opposite for all these markets. I have schools, they'll look on my tour schedule and they say, oh, I see you're going to be here on Thursday. Can you come to our school the next day? Giddy up, it's like there's no competition between them. So they're happy to know when you're in the area. In fact, one of the things I do is when I'm performing a college in a certain area, I send a postcard to all the colleges in that region saying, hey, here's some colleges in your area that I've booked, and here's the show I'm doing there. Because it's kind of like, when you drive down your neighborhood and somebody's painting their house and you see the name of the painter and you go, oh, well, if they got them, they must be good. Maybe I'll have them pay. So it's a good little promotion that way too. But it's very much like, hey, when you're there, let's do it. But you can build on that once you have a reputation. On Long Island, there's 1 million elementary schools. I'm to the point now where I can tell the school what date I have for them, and I can go down and do the whole week just on Long Island each day and then get out of there, rather than going up and down, back and forth. But that
That's
comes with, a little experience. Yeah, the answer is yes. Once they like you, then you can try to put them together in some way that makes sense.
I can totally see this, and part of the reason that I loved what you were talking about is we're not suggesting that you stop trying to play folk
No.
gigs. This is a great way to supplement and fill those days in between, and again, keep your chops up and grow your audience. I would think are two pretty important aspects of this. So do you want to, we're at the last 15 minutes here. There are probably a gazillion more things that we could continue to talk about. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about the Parks and Rec?
Yeah, okay. So Parks and Rec, these are the community sponsored every municipality, every county, city, state, county, village, city, and what did I say? I think I covered them. But all of them, many of them have what's called a Park and Rec department. These are the departments that have the money for entertainment. In addition to maintaining the parks, they book all the entertainment, not just for the parks, but for whatever they got going on for the year. Maybe they got an Earth Day fair. Maybe they have a holiday show and craft fair. Maybe they have and summer camps, and it's a line item for them. So they already have the money, and they're looking for stuff. So the parks, it's usually the Park and Rec department that books the stuff. One big difference is, and this is weird, these people, they want to book their year on January 2nd, man. They want to get into the new year, and they want to fill their calendar. So you really have to be on top of it, which took me years to kind of get with that program, because I'm like, well, it's the springtime. Maybe I'll look for some summer work. No, it'll be all gone. It's not unlike, it's very not uncommon for many of these Park and Rec directors. They call me up January 2nd. So I try to have all my promotions to them in their hands by them, because they're going to book everything. They're going to book all their fairs and festivals and their summer concerts in the village green and all their camps. So you really have to get on them early. But that's a great market because they have money. Again, probably in that similar to school, probably between $500 and $1,000 for stuff that they pay out, more for more and less depending what it is, and so forth. But and I do the same thing with flyers. Get them out there, get them to them. Try to hit up the places that have had me before, and you become a regular. A lot of these places, they have you every year. If they like what you're doing, you'll be there every year.
Yeah. And you're just essentially finding these places. You're just going out and hitting the Google and
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. And how do you find these places? With
Right.
all of these markets, all of this information is easily available online. There's no secret handbook. There's no conference you got to go to. You want to find out the Park and Rec, start in the communities around you and build it out. And just find out each county, city, village, and town government. Poke in there and see if they've got a Park and Rec department. And there's the address. There's the phone number. Maybe even the person. Could be. But it's all right there at your fingertips. Same thing with schools. Schools are obviously grouped by school district, not by geography, like counties and stuff. But find out what the school district is nearest you. Move to the next one. There'll be a list on that school district page, a drop-down box for elementary and middle schools, intermediate schools. And there's all the information, all the contact information right there. Same thing with colleges.
Right. Good. Okay, hold on, Shanna. I'm seeing conversation. Shanna, this is so helpful, Mark. This should be in Shanna's voice. I'm just curious what you've learned about designing these programs that works that you weren't nailing when you first started. That's a great question.
Well, yeah, I mean, tons. Just it's hard to even think where to start because, believe me, I went kicking and screaming into anything other than my own songs, man. Like I'm a singer-songwriter, so that's what we all want to do. And so every time there was a push, well, yeah, but could you do this? And I said, oh, yeah, okay. Here's an example. I used to play some colleges in the New York City area. There's a lot of students from China and from India, especially the technical colleges. And I would do like sort of an international program sometimes for them with music from different cultures and around the world. And they said, there's been a request, could you learn a Chinese folk song and a song from India? And I was like, oh man, because that's so much harder than a Spanish song or a French song. So I researched it, found somebody who spoke the language, found a good song and learned it. The impact, when I started playing this Chinese folk song called Mo Li Wa, which I didn't know at the moment was apparently the song that the students used in the Tiananmen Square uprising. It was like a patriotic song of their force. I didn't know that. I just learned the song. I started playing the song, just like any other song. Well, here we go. All the Chinese students suddenly turned to me and stood up with tears in their eyes, listening to
Wow.
this song. And I was like, holy cow, I've just like touched into something I never would have touched otherwise. You know, and I sang a song from India, and the Indian students came up and they were just had this weird smile, and they said, I've never heard a white person sing a song from India before. You know, so you are, you know, I learned a bunch of songs for Hanukkah in my multicultural holiday show, and not the obvious ones, but the nice ones in Hebrew. And I've had people come up and say, we're just submerged in Christmas music. I'm so happy to hear you just really brought a touch of home to me. So this happens all the time, learning new stuff and just doing it because that's what the gig called for. And then you get to the gig, perform it, and you realize you have touched people in a way I never would have with my own songs as a singer-songwriter. So that's the
Amazing.
most important part to me.
Amazing. I feel kind of like that was such a great finish, but we probably have more questions. I wanted, I guess the boring stuff is what's left on my list. By that I mean tech stuff. You own your own PA, your own lights, and investing in all of that. But I
Most of
want
these
to.
places will want you to bring your own equipment, and you should, and they'll have equipment, but it'll take you longer to figure out their equipment than to just have your own.
Well, so this is what's interesting is that Gus Garfield, who is a venue and a service provider sound engineer, he is, he's looking at this like, oh, alternative venues, like, he could run around and like offer people like you his services as a sound engineer so you don't have to haul your stuff. Is that the kind of thing that he's saying? Should I focus on artists or on venues? And Gus, feel free to chime in if I'm misunderstanding. And do artists look for local service providers for that kind of support? So it sounds like you have your own sound, you have your own control, which, that's great and it's an investment. But for somebody who
Also-
doesn't want to carry their stuff with them, right?
Right, you have to drive 6 hours to Syracuse. Maybe there's a guy in Syracuse you should connect up with, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true, and I think that in general that would be nice. I've just found that there's not the budget for it. They don't want to pay. I don't want to take it out of my thing, and I would have to charge them. I'm imagining at least a couple $100 for somebody to bring a basic sound system, and most of the time it would just be a deal breaker that they wouldn't do. So it's more of a financial thing. They want you to have the stuff, and if you don't, they're not going to provide it or pay extra for it. That's
Interesting.
just been my experience.
Gus, I think in that way, like to answer your question, personally, I would think that reaching out to the venues, the schools, the ones that offer the programs and offer your services to them,
Right.
and
I just
then
did a
they
show
can
up at.
say, oh, we have a sound system for your artist,
I
right?
was just up a couple of weekends ago, City of Albany, capital of New York State. They were trying to do some downtown events to bring people back downtown. And when I got there, it was very nice because they had hired a sound company. And I talked to the guy there and says, oh, yeah, we have the contract for all of their stuff like this. So that's probably a better way to go, especially with a larger municipality, is to contact and say, hey, I'm a sound company. You got lots of outdoor things with sound needs. Let's see if we can work out a deal, rather than trying to get the itinerant musician coming through, that kind of thing. The only
Yeah.
time I would ever do that is when there's a venue like a college that I have to fly to, and I do, and then they got to provide everything. It's just, I'm going to show up with my guitar, and so you got to provide lights and sound and everything, and that's just part of the deal going in, but not typically at all.
So I want to make sure I get to a couple of things before we have to go. We're down to our last 6 or so minutes. Nancy is asking, and I was curious about this too, have you ever gotten negative feedback for performing songs from another culture?
Wow, what an interesting question. No. There's a couple places I thought I would bump into it and didn't. In the old days, you do a Christmas show, and those days are long gone at colleges and schools, particularly because of our multicultural, progression in the country. And so, when I was singing these Hebrew songs or songs, I thought, wow, are people going to be like, it's what do they call it? The appropriation is what they call now, right? I've never had anybody, and in fact, it's been the opposite. I play hammer dulcimer, which is actually a 7th century Persian instrument called a santur. And a girl came up to me at a college in Washington, Baltimore, and she her family had just moved from Iran a few months ago, and she was not. It was a tough adjustment for her. And she said she walked in and heard Santur music, and it just gave her a sense of peace and home. So it's really been the opposite. I will say this though, the colleges know that I'll put together these all kinds of programs. There was a college called me and they said, it's Hispanic History Month. They said, could you do a show for that? I said, I'm gonna have to draw the line there because I'm just not the guy for that job. And this is literally what she said. She said, well, you could wear a sombrero. And I said, yeah, I don't think we're doing that anymore, so
Yeah, wow.
I think I could easily wander into but here's another one. Also, I do a program on the music of the Civil Rights Movement where I go and I talk about the Civil Rights Movement, what it's about, how it came about, why the songs were so important and so good, and it's often in Black History Month, right? And so you don't get less black than me and this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy from the Sticks, but I explain to people it was a white and black thing together in every way, and so it's totally appropriate that I'm here singing these songs. But no one has really been bothered by that aspect at all. They embrace it. They're happy that somebody is paying attention to their culture.
Yep. That's awesome. Shanna's posted a nice comment out there for those of you following the chat. Another market she learned about was healing arts festivals. Yeah. And it's interesting because it looks like she was booked because of her music fitting into it. And it doesn't look like, Shanna, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't look like you had to change anything that you do. It was your music they wanted. So I think it's also interesting that those of us who are singer-songwriters and do want more ears on our own songs and don't really have a large repertoire like you do. But certainly, I mean, I personally love learning cover songs and love learning songs, and I spent a lot of years playing cover songs and made a whole lot more money in bars, during the years that I was doing that than I ever have as a folk artist. But we've lost a lot of that. And so when you start to pursue this stuff, it takes some work, right? Like I'm getting the impression you're always learning new music, it sounds like, at least to a certain extent, because, right?
And you find, absolutely, and that, boy, isn't that fun? It's not like you got to 40 years old and said, okay, I've learned everything I need to learn now.
Right.
I mean, I'm constantly learning and writing new music for different situations. And there are situations, I mean, for example, the Hudson Valley Garlic Festival, tens of thousands of people, 4 continuous stages of music. I can do a lot of original music when I'm playing that program.
Yeah.
But then there are others where you can mix in some of your own songs, and then some where your own songs are just not gonna, they're just not gonna work in the program. So every show I do, I mix and match it together like a cookbook, and you put it together what's going to work for that, whether that's cover songs, original songs, historical songs, folk songs, international music. But if you have them in your belt, man, you can really do so much more because now you have so many more tools to work with.
Yeah, amazing. Sue Fink, and I meant to bring Sue up because I saw her pop up on the screen earlier, but I happen to know that she's mentioned this, she looked at her own original songs and found themes among them and created programs that she's selling to. And we didn't really talk about libraries, but I know that libraries are part of that.
Yeah.
They are, but they're on
programs.
the lower end, so somebody else can speak to that. I play libraries, but I find that the prices are all over the place.
Yeah.
The well-funded ones that have some kind of funding or grant writing thing going on, they have decent budgets. You can get 500 and up from a library, but typically they're more in the 250, 350 range. And again, I'm not making it all about money, but this is a business conversation, right? So I'm trying to talk about how can you maximize and monetize what you're doing to keep you afloat as a musician. So again, they're sort of like the coffee house. Any library that calls, I'll go and do it, but I don't pursue it because I got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. I love it. Charlie, you got to stop putting funny things in the chat, Mr. Mossbrook back there. I'm not sure you're doing your job, Charlie. I'm just teasing. The chat's been very fun. I'm glad we opened it. Mark, let's just wrap this up with, how about you just rattle off a list of all the instruments you play.
Oh.
Good Lord, you mentioned them in the beginning, but it was like they went by so fast. And I was like, holy moly. Wow.
Well, okay. So guitar and banjo and fiddle, piano, hammer dulcimer, mountain dulcimer, ukulele, and spoons and limberjack. I think that's most of them.
Limberjack?
The little dancing guy on
A
the
little
stick. Yeah, the little dancing man. In
Nice.
fact, one of the workshops I do, and I'm going to be doing it at a camp next week, is something I call the instrument experience. And I set up stations with all the different instruments, and the kids have a few minutes at each station to try playing a hammered dulcimer, mountain dulcimer, plucking the banjo, bowing the fiddle, and you're inspiring the next generation of folk musicians, really, because they never see this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and just getting their hands on these instruments, I show them how to play and just go. You know,
Yeah.
here's how you hold it, here's what you do, go. And they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing.
They call me a poor man's John McCutcheon.
Oh gosh. Well, I feel bad that Victoria's just entering the room, but we're going to let Victoria get into the room, and then I'm going to remind everyone that you have been enjoying the wealth of knowledge and expertise, and obviously there's a whole lot more in there. Mark Rust was kind enough to share with us today. Mark Rust is a community member of ours. If you've been attending our community peer gatherings, he's been at just about every single one, and we always enjoy your wisdom and hearing what you have to say.
And can I add one last thing?
You can.
Here's the last reason to do. I've been giving you a lot of reasons to do that, and here's the last reason, and I think the most important one.
Yeah.
And this is that folk music, as we all know, has become a little marginalized in our society. And part of that is our fault. You know, we have to be out in the public. You can't just continue to perform preaching to the choir, you know, in these folk venues. They're great venues, but the people there already know about folk. They already love it. The reason there aren't young people is because we're not there. So I think it's our responsibility as folk musicians to continue to outreach. You got to get out into the public, into these other venues where you're gonna see kids, you're gonna see college students, young adults, young families who know nothing about this kind of music, and you're gonna teach them, and you're gonna get them excited about it. And that's something we all need to be doing more of.
Amazing. And on that note, how about, we'll just do a bunch of this for Mr. Mark Rust. Thank y'all. I am going to once again thank Charlie Mossbrook, who's back there.
Charlie.
Twiddling his thumbs. I don't know what he's doing, really. He's just enjoying himself. And mostly, thank you to you all. This has been one of the most popular of our Tech Talks of late, and we appreciate that. Now, for those of you who are also interested, all of our past Tech Talks are on YouTube. We try to get them immediately into the playlist, and I'll just shout out to Sue Fink. I don't know if Craig Seamson is in the room, but I know that several of you are familiar with a lot of these markets and different ways of marketing yourself as artists. And we had a conversation about this, I don't know, sometime last year, I think, where we did
Let me say too,
panel.
I'm really busy with shows the next week or two, but if you have more questions personally for you, send me an email. It's just my name. It's markrust@markrust.com. It was some specific question I can help you out with more. I'm happy to pass along a little more info. So feel free to reach out. If you want more clarification or some question about something, happy to help.
I think I just typed it correctly. We're going to see.
That's it.
All right. Tomorrow night, for all you folk music venues, live music presenters, we have our live music presenter peer gathering tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Farmfolk.org. Stay in touch. We've got an amazing conference and presenter summit planned for you in the fall. Alan Stanley and company are doing, and the board is amazing. I think we have Mike Green is on the board, and he's running or helping to organize the presenter summit. Alexa Dawson, our fearless leader, farm board president, is in the house, and I'm not 100% sure which other board members have popped in, but Charlie Mossbrook is on the board of FAI, and we are an incredibly grateful community to have all y'all in here, and so please stay in touch with us, and we look forward to seeing you in a Zoom room and in person. If you're not registered for the conference yet, go to farmfolk, not fork, farmfolk.org. Although I would be curious to know what farmfork.org brings up. I have my typos. Let's go for it. All right, everyone. I am going to end the live stream out there. So say goodbye to the world out there, and then we'll do a quiet send off here in the Zoom.